doesn't create a significant amount of jobs, and it also does not utilize the existing public infrastructure. So after viewing how other counties across the state handled it, I decided to leave them where they are currently allowed, and that is that they would be prohibited in R, which is residential, prohibited in B2 neighborhood shopping, and allowed with either a special use permit or a conditional district rezoning in B1, GI, and RC. The only changes to that section is that I reformatted the table so it matches the table in the planning ordinance. The planning board did request in that table that I add CD to where S was listed. And that's just to avoid any confusion and so that it's clear to the public that anyone applying for a special use permit can also apply for a conditional district rezoning. There are no changes to setbacks other than reformatting the table, again, to match what's in the planning ordinance. However, a setback of 100 feet from a well was added after speaking with the previous environmental health supervisor, Harold Kelly. Mr. Kelly felt that 100-foot setback from wells for solar would be sufficient based on the existing setbacks in the state requirements. And basically the state requires a 100-foot setback for wells from sewage and liquid waste collection sites, from cesspools, from privies, from non-hazardous waste storage or disposal and petroleum or chemical storage systems. So again, based on those, which we felt were fairly comparable, we felt that a 100-foot setback would be more than sufficient. The buffer width, I just realized that's ahead. Okay. So the buffer width is being reduced from 150 feet to 100 feet, while the planting height of trees is increasing from 3 feet to 6 feet at the time of planting. And I'll go into a little more detail in that in just a minute when I talk about fire protection. So aviation notification to other agencies has increased from 30 days to 45 days prior to the public hearing. Also, any special use permits or conditional district rezonings that are submitted will also be reviewed by the Person County Airport Commission in addition to staff review. We currently require a decommissioning plan and a bond amount equal to 1.25 times the cost of the project. Additional language was added to include that the bond shall be reviewed every 5 years by a licensed engineer. Additional information shall be included with the special use permit and conditional district rezoning application, including but not limited to a copy of the lease agreement, battery storage information, a phase 1 environmental analysis, and any other relevant studies or documents that are requested by staff and or the planning board or the board of commissioners. Okay. There we go. So a fire response and emergency response section was added to the ordinance to ensure proper emergency response coverage, along with the requirement of an emergency response plan that must be filed with the county fire marshal. Any new equipment that's needed by local fire districts shall be provided by the old owner of the solar energy system. Chemical fire suppressants shall be stored by any battery storage areas if applicable, or they shall be stored by any battery storage areas. And the 50-foot buffer around the site shall be maintained by the owner and inspected annually. So this section was added after seeing it in the draft for Stanley County and after I consulted with 2 of the local fire chiefs. So we discussed the new proposed buffer requirement. So if you can imagine, you have a 150-foot setback from the property line for solar energy systems, and then you have a 100-foot buffer. So that leaves a 50-foot gap in between the buffer and the start of the solar energy system. So the fire chiefs felt like they needed that area to get around the perimeter of the site to contain any possible fires. We discussed at length how they would approach fires at solar energy systems. And I learned that they approach it as on a defensive approach rather than offensive approach. And basically they're trying to contain the fire and push it back into the site So again, that's why that 50-foot perimeter area is important. It was a very informative conversation that I had with those fire chiefs, and I wanted to make sure that this new section regarding fire prevention and emergency response facilities met with their approval, along with the fire marshal and our building inspections director. Prior to receiving a certificate of compliance, a noise level certification letter shall be submitted to ensure that noise from any equipment is barely audible at the property boundaries. And an annual inspection shall be required by staff to ensure continued compliance, and a fee will be added at a later date for that inspection. So no fee changes are proposed at this time, recognizing that we would have to add one for that annual inspection and possibly reassess any of our other fees, which is typically coming up in the next month or so, as I'm required to submit any fee changes for the next fiscal year. The draft ordinance was sent to the following boards and committees for review. I wanted to make sure that the previous boards and committees that reviewed it in 2020, again, reviewed it in 2021. So it was sent to the Economic Development Commission, excuse me, the Airport Commission, and the Farm Bureau. The Economic Development Committee, I did make a presentation before them. They asked a lot of great questions, but they had no suggested changes to the ordinance. The Airport Committee had no suggested changes other than updating the website address for solar glare studies, which was done. And the Farm Bureau had the same comments as the previous year, and that is that they felt like solar sites would be bad for future agricultural production. So circling back around to those initial concerns that were brought up, it being an industrial use. As I stated after talking with the EDC director and looking at the use across the state, I have not proposed any changes to where solar can be located. The buffer height did increase from 6 feet to 3 feet at the time of planning, while reducing the buffer width from 150 to 100. Again, that reduction in width will allow for better fire protection around the perimeter of the site, and increasing it from 3 to 6 will provide a better buffer at the time of planning, rather than waiting several years for it to get to 6 feet in height. Battery storage. So an additional section was added regarding battery storage, and it states that any battery storage containing PFAS technology must be notated in the application. So PFAS stands for polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS for short. It is basically a class of chemicals that are used in a variety of industries to create coatings that are water repellent. And a great example of that is Teflon, is a PFAS. So the planning board did ask or requested that I add the word polyfluoroalkyl substances in parentheses to section 3.1 E2C, just so the reader will know what it stands for. And so this new section does state that if a project uses PFAS, then it must submit a containment plan and a separate decommissioning plan for battery storage areas that contain the PFASs. Decommissioning, I feel like we already had a well-written decommissioning section comparable with other jurisdictions across the state. I did add that the decommissioning bond needs to be reviewed every 5 years by a licensed engineer to determine, number one, that it's still valid, and number two, that it takes into account for inflation over the past 5 years. So that amount might need to be adjusted. Size limitation. So while looking at solar energy system ordinances across the state, and even looking at other states, I could not find any jurisdiction that had a size limitation on solar energy systems. And as a staff member, I did not feel comfortable picking an arbitrary number to place on a size limitation. This was presented to the planning board, where they discussed this topic at length. And they did propose adding additional language regarding a size limitation and a distance separation. So they proposed to add section 2.3, height and size limitation, item B, to read that the maximum size of a level 3 solar energy system shall not exceed 300 acres as measured around the perimeter of the immediate perimeter of the panels, and it shall not be located within 1 linear mile of an existing level 3 solar energy system. So again, just to reiterate, maximum size of 300 acres, and they shall not be located closer to another, within 1 linear mile of another level 3 solar energy system ordinance, or solar energy system, excuse me. So the effect on the environment and the wildlife. So research right now, and I looked at quite a bit, is kind of scarce on how solar facilities affects wildlife. And I feel like that's because they're still fairly new in the realm of things. Solar facilities have the potential to deter, to attract, or to be imperceptible to different wildlife species, depending on the species. So I did include a requirement for any relevant studies, reports, documentation that might be required by staff, or again, any board member as it pertains to field surveys for state and federally listed species that are protected under law. And as for the environment, a phase 1 environmental site assessment shall be submitted with all level 3 applications. Also, under that additional information section that can be requested by staff or board, there's also several environmental reports that can be requested, including geological reports, surface water reports, soil surveys, and an environmental constraint analysis. Photovoltaic heat island effect. So this question has been raised across the United States, not just in North Carolina, and it continues to be examined. Does the area around the solar energy system basically heat up as a cause of the solar energy system being located there? As renewable energy continues to surge, will large-scale facilities produce a heat island effect? And at this time, I've looked through several articles and several data, and there's just not enough definitive data at this time to support that. In fact, I've read some research models that suggested that solar energy systems can actually have a cooling effect on the local environment, depending on the efficiency and the placement of the panels. So this area of concern will continue to be monitored as solar continues to increase. And the last topic, I'm almost done, is the loss of farmland, which brings me to the topic that I discovered of agrovoltaics. So agrovoltaics is the simultaneous use of areas of land for both solar power generation and agriculture. So while it's not as common in the US right now, other countries are slightly raising their solar panels in order to grow crops underneath. Other countries are also having animals that are grazing under the solar panels. And I do believe that we have that occurring at maybe 1 or 2 of the solar energy systems that are located here in Person County. So planning staff recommends approval of TA 03-21. The proposed text will address board member and community concerns and better regulate solar energy systems. At the planning board meeting on December 9th, 2021, the board recommended unanimous, which was 4-0 approval of the text amendment with the following changes. Table 2.1, as I mentioned, adding S in the chart to, or excuse me, changing the S in the chart to read S/CD, just so that it is clear that an applicant can apply for either a special use permit or a conditional district rezoning. Section 2.3, changing the title to height and size limitation and include B, that I previously mentioned that there shall be a maximum acreage of 300 acres for level 3 solar energy systems, and they shall not be located within 1 linear mile of another existing level 3 system. And section 3.1 E2C to include what PFAS means in parentheses. So we did have 2 planning board members that had some concerns that they wanted me to express to the board. Board member James, Zykia James, had concerns about limiting the size of a level 3 solar energy system and the impact that it would have on economic development for the county. Planning board member Tabitha George had concerns about requiring a 1 mile separation in between the level 3 solar energy systems. and how it would impact or affect an adjoining property owner who might want to develop a solar energy system in the future. Both board members voted to approve the text amendment as it was written with the changes in order to move it along in the process, recognizing that we were under a moratorium. Lastly is your statement of reasonableness and consistency, which I have included in your packet and must be included when you make a motion, that the text amendment is consistent with the Person County and City of Roxborough Joint Comprehensive Land Use Plan, and that it meets future planning goals and objectives of the county. It is reasonable and in the public interest, as it will provide clear regulations to the Person County Solar Energy System Ordinance. And the proposed text amendment meets the comprehensive plan guiding principle 2, which states that the county should facilitate economic growth. And if you have any questions for me at this time, which I'm guessing there might be a few, I will be happy to try my best to answer them as soon as I get a drink.
Commissioner Powell, I would love to ask a couple of questions.
Yes, sir. Proceed.
Good morning.
Morning.
Just some overview and my time off vacation on this right here, subject of the solar farm moratorium and adjustments to the regulations. Now, this is my personal observation. Boston Road. You have parcel acreage of 479 on one side and 34 on the other side. Um, 479 is, to me, a large number. Now, we've brought ours down to 300, which by my math, 300 acres is just under a half a square mile at 46,875 square feet. Now, if you look at the average farm in Person County, you don't have a 100-acre farm with open field. You have small tracts of land which average 20, 40 acres. So if we approve a 300-acre solar panel farm, we're looking at several miles of solar panels. And I personally don't like that. I think we need to drop that acreage down, regardless as to what the other counties are doing. I think we should and could set a model for the other counties to follow. Page 14. Okay, I'm sorry. Page 35, section 2-4. Why is the reduction in screening buffers from 150 to 100 feet for level 2 and 3 sites?
So as I had explained, we went from 150 to 100 because number one, we were increasing the height. So you could no longer plant a 3-foot tall shrub. You had to plant a 6-foot tall shrub. So that provides a better instant screening. And number two, we wanted to allow for the fire department and emergency services to have that area in between the buffer and the solar energy system. So by reducing the buffer back to 100, that gave them that 50-foot perimeter around the site to get their vehicles in there to contain a fire. And looking at other counties, most of them have a 50-foot buffer. I think the most stringent I saw was a 100-foot buffer. So I felt like we were still providing an adequate buffer at 100 feet, again, by raising the height of the initial planting to provide more of an instant screening.
Okay, question number 2 on page 35.
Mr. Chairman, I have a
Yes.
procedural observation and suggestion. The board is in a public hearing about this proposed revised ordinance. Let me point out that the next agenda item is board consideration of it. And I think that would be the appropriate time for questions, discussion by the board about the proposed ordinance. And there certainly then, during that next agenda item, would be adequate opportunity to ask these questions to the planning director.
So like we talked earlier, the first February meeting,
And I am happy when we get to the next agenda item, board consideration, to answer the questions you asked me publicly
okay,
and to assist in that discussion by the board. But this is a public hearing.
okay, thank you. You may be excused.
I can leave.
Thank you, Lord.
Okay, thank you, Lori. Then at this time we do have a period of public comment concerning this matter. Do we have public comment listed?
Individuals signed up to speak,
Okay.
both speaking in favor of the proposed changes
Okay,
as presented. Do you wish to set a time limit before we get started?
I don't know. You only have two.
Correct.
Let's do at least 5 minutes.
Okay,
Is that
all right. Our first speaker is Mr. Ray Fashy of Hurdle Mills Road, Hurdle Mills.
Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you
Morning.
for hearing the opinions of what we think and what the residents have to say. And I would like to start by saying our support is not waning. Obviously, we've had a good group of folks at every other meeting, but it's just been difficult for many to get here this morning in combination with the ICE, COVID, and meeting during work time. But the Person County residents, particularly Hurdle Mill residents, applaud your actions to reject two large mega solar facilities. It's apparent that you listened to your residents and you worked with them for the betterment of Person County. We also appreciate your support and actions to establish this moratorium in an effort to get this solar ordinance right, because we've been working on it for some time. And we want to thank the planning and zoning staff and board for all the work and efforts to make a solar ordinance clear, effective, and supportive of Person County's best interest. It's been apparent that county residents desire stricter controls to regulate these facilities, and this revised solar ordinance is certainly a step in the right direction. So with that understood, we have two further suggestions, or I have two further suggestions for your consideration. Commissioner Palmer, it's going to sound like I read your notes, but I'm assuring you and I have not talked. But so I would like to add, Person County does not have to be the follower in setting up an ordinance. We can be the leader. We don't have to wait till somebody else does it before we think of it. We need to be the leader for that standpoint. A proposed recommendation of the planning and zoning staff is to reduce the buffer from 150 foot to 100 foot and add a 50-foot right of way around the perimeter for emergency vehicles. While this is a great suggestion to add the 50-foot right of way, let's not compromise our buffer arrangement. The buffer has been a big issue in every meeting that we've had. The screening, the buffer, we wanted more buffer to get adequate screening. And here we are possibly proposing to remove 50 foot of the buffer. True, it keeps solar panels from infringing on that 50 foot, but we need the entire 150 foot buffer plus the 50 foot right of way. So that's our recommendation or our suggestion number one. Our second suggestion is, in addition, we're so thankful to Planning and Zoning Board to recommend setting a maximum size on level 3 solar facilities at 300 acres with at least 1 linear mile between facilities. However, Person County right now still has 10 solar facilities, with the largest one being 37 acres in size. And many of us in Person County already feel like we have an abundance of these solar facilities. They're kind of dotting our landscape as they are, particularly for a county our size. So we would like to respectfully suggest that we set the maximum size at 150 acres, which is still 4 times the size of our largest solar facility that we have in the county right now, and still maintain the suggested 1 linear mile distance between solar facilities. We think this is a desire of Person County residents, and we certainly hope that you as commissioners will support those desires. Again, I thank you for hearing our suggestions, and we residents are hopeful that you'll consider these proposed changes. Thank you.
Thank
Any
you, sir.
questions for me?
Next, Madam Clerk.
Okay, no questions.
All right, our next speaker is Mr. Paul Lynch of Union Grove Church Road, Hurdle Mills.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Happy
Good morning.
belated New Year to everybody. I'd like to offer also, before I begin, a belated thanks to you all for your votes to deny the Hurdle Mills Solar Project and the Berea Road Solar Project. It was a courageous decision, and it was the right one for Pershing County, so thank you again. Now, the ordinance under consideration is a good attempt to get some kinds of reasonable constraints around solar projects in Pershing County. The planning board had a lot of discussion on finding ways to balance things between outright banning these projects on the one hand and allowing laissez-faire, do whatever you want development on the other hand. My thanks to Lori also and the planning staff and the planning board for their work and consideration of a difficult situation. Now, here we are today in this circumstance, thanks to the irresponsible energy policies of the current crowd in control of La La Land on the Potomac. Solar projects are being driven by obscene amounts of federal dollars and other subsidies. If we don't place reasonable constraints on them, Pershing County could become one huge solar power plant running up and down the transmission line systems. It's clear, I believe, that the residents do not want this to happen. Now, I want to focus on ordinance section 2.3.b. The maximum size limitation is 300 acres. However, I suggest that the definition of how this is measured needs to be tightened up some. Lori at the planning board meeting put it very eloquently when she said, quote, applicants get very creative to find ways to get around zoning ordinance restrictions. Defined as around the immediate perimeter of the panels means that the actual acreage of a project will be considerably more than 300 acres when you include buffers and roads and so forth. To prevent creative efforts by developers to pack panels even tighter, please consider setting the acreage as defined by the project boundaries, not by the immediate acre around the panels. Now, the minimum separation between projects is very important. Please consider that even with a 1 mile constraint, if you put a 300-acre project where the Hurdle Mills application was and the Berea project application was, which is on the very southern end of the county, and then go 1 mile north and plop down 2 more up the transmission system, and then go another mile and plop down 2 more, and so forth, right on up to the coal plants on the lakes, okay? You could theoretically end up easily with more than 20 projects of this size in Pershing County. Remember, please, economics, energy needs, even common sense are meaningless in a situation where endless dollars and subsidies are being thrown around. If a developer can plot panels down anywhere, they can't lose, and they will do so. Now, others have spoken before me and have suggested further reducing the maximum size of a project. I respectfully request that you carefully consider those recommendations. I also suggest consideration of increasing the minimum separation between projects. If we allow many of these to be built, Pershing County will end up looking like a string of cheap beads on a necklace all up and down the transmission lines, and it can change the very character of the local areas around them. So thank you for focusing on the needs and the concerns of the residents with this ordinance. And I pray for wisdom for all of you as you consider what to do. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, those opposed?
There are no further speakers in this public hearing.
Okay, do we have a motion to close the public hearing? Discussion? All in favor? Please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carried. Then item number 2 on the agenda would be action by this board to grant or deny the request to revise the Pershing County Solar Energy System Ordinance. What's the pleasure, of the board?
Chair, at this time, if we have any questions, concerns, do we want to talk about that now?
Well, if you,
Before I would like to hear from I know
either
Commissioner
or, we
Palmer.
should make a motion and then discuss.
Chairman, you can do it either way. Traditionally,
either.
there probably should be a motion on the floor, but it's not absolutely necessary
that's
before
fine.
discussion.
Proceed then. Commissioner Sims.
Commissioner Palmer, I know you had some concerns. Was there any more stuff you wanted to mention when you were talking about your concerns?
Yes, there was. Page 35, section 2-4. From what I'm reading off of the agenda, there's a reduction from line 1, of tree planting heights of 6 foot to 3 foot. On line 2 in section 2-4 on page 35. I'm very confused there.
I don't believe our page numbers are lining up because I don't have a 35, but I will say that the buffer planting section again has, and let me get over to that, section 2.4. You can see where 3 foot, 2.4B1, 3 foot was scratched out and 6 foot was added in its place. So it has increased, not decreased. And again, that's just for the evergreen and deciduous trees. I propose not to make any changes to the shrub requirements because there is a mixture of trees and shrubs required. So the change was, again, to change it from 3 foot at the time of planting for a tree to 6 foot, and that it also has to have a minimum height of 15 feet within 3 years. So that was the change.
You don't have the same agenda that I do evidently.
The packet that
Right.
you're,
Page 35.
right, and it's number 1. Can you see then in red, the 3 is crossed out, replaced by a 6 foot?
It might be the colors are difficult.
Right, it might be that, but it does have the new
The new
revision of
is
6.
6, not 3. 3 is the existing. 6
That's
is,
an increase in height
yes.
at initial plan.
My understanding is different. 5 evergreen shrubs or 3 evergreens, 2 deciduous shrubs that shall be a minimum of 3 foot at planting and have a height and spread of at least 5 foot in 10 years.
That's
Right.
number 2. Go right above that. That's for shrubs. Look right above that is your tree requirement. That's the requirement that increased.
But I'm talking about shrubs. Okay, number 1, every 500 square foot of buffer shall include 1 evergreen, 1 deciduous tree that shall be minimum of 6 foot at planting, have a minimum height of 15 feet within 3 years and spread for the deciduous trees of at least 30 feet within 10 years. So we got a mixture here of
Yes, and that's very
Vegetation.
common in buffer requirements because you
staggered?
don't want, you don't want all shrubs or all trees. You want a combination to provide the best buffer.
that explains it. That explains it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry, that was a little confusing.
Yeah, I was scratching my head several times, several nights on this. I couldn't quite grasp it. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Sims.
Had a question on the moratorium is, and we're due, that ends in February, is that correct? February
About February 16th.
February 16th. And we just, if we decided that we wanted to continue that, is that allowed or no?
Mr. Palmer asked me the same question. Let me just answer that publicly, explain the interplay between this proposed ordinance, if you were to adopt it right here, right now, and the previously adopted moratorium ordinance. In August, the board adopted that ordinance that imposed a 6-month moratorium or waiting period, a freeze on additional solar system applications, whether it's a special use permit application or a conditional district zoning, and moratorium for 6 months. even if you all, if the board were to adopt this proposed revised ordinance today, that moratorium period under the previously adopted ordinance remains in effect until about February 16th, when it expires, unless the board also takes action to repeal or amend that previous moratorium ordinance.
Okay.
Happy to answer questions about that. In other words, adoption of this revised ordinance today does not in any way automatically end that moratorium period, because it was imposed by the board under the previous ordinance.
So my understanding would be that any changes that the board recommends today, if we don't accept this and we want further changes, this is a continuance.
Right.
This becomes a
is-
continuance
What
for
is
us.
before the board now is a proposed revised ordinance.
Right.
Completely revises by making a good number of changes to the existing regulatory scheme with respect to solar energy systems. Board certainly does not have to adopt this ordinance today. If one of the commissioners makes a motion to adopt it, remember the rule that on first consideration, the vote must be unanimous to adopt it on first reading. If it gets a majority vote, but not unanimous, then it would go over to a following meeting. During your discussion now, after you ask whatever questions, additional questions you'd like to ask, and after whatever discussion you might want, when an ordinance is before the board, proposed amendments to it, including some of the ones that have been suggested, certainly are in order. And the procedure would be to offer an amendment, a specific amendment, which I'm happy to help draft if there are any. And then board discussion, and then vote the proposed amendment up or down. And obviously, if a majority of the board votes in favor of an amendment, it becomes part of the proposed ordinance that is before you for adoption.
Okay, Mr. Attorney, keep us on track here. This is good. Okay, so my question is, any solar power that is developed from any of these farms needs to be sold back to a power company, which is an industrial use. So how do we not categorize this solar farm as an industrial use when it can only be sold back to a power company? I have a problem because it is industrial use. Anything that's generated by it has to go back to industry. It can't be sold anywhere else. So I think that needs a review. The 5-year review process by the engineer, is that significant? I mean, is that sufficient? Does that need to be shorter period of time? Because what if there are gaps between years? Can we do this at every 2 years instead of 5 years? Is this a burden on the county to do so? And if we find infractions, what's the process for dealing with them? What's the violation? What's the fine? If people aren't living up to their end of the bargain, we need to have something in place that says this is what happens when you are not in compliance. That's not clear. It's just open. And I think that needs to be tightened up. I like the buffers as far as the mix of evergreens and the sizes and whatnot, but there's nothing in there that says if something dies, if there's a fire, there's a time limit that has to be replaced. And it has to be replaced with what was existing. We don't start over again at 3 foot or 6 foot. We have to do something that to my opinion, needs to be better defined, because those could be destroyed by a fire, by a hurricane, anything else. So if those things come into play, how do we replace them and how quickly is that done? I am not in favor personally of extending the buffers to 100 feet. I think 150 plus 50 feet for a road is adequate. I think we should keep that. I think 150 acres is significant. I mean, it's already larger than most of our solar farms. And I do like the suggestion that we look at project boundaries. And as far as the heat effect, I know that that's, we're looking at research models, and there's just so much unknown about solar power and how efficient and how long run it's going to be. We just don't know enough about it. So I think we should just take a step back and tighten this up a little bit more. I like the work that you guys have done. I think it's great. It's a great start. And I know there's concerns about restricting people's use of their property. But we also have a community and to think of. And when I think of solar farms, I don't think that impacts in a positive way economic development. I don't think it adds to the bottom line. And I don't think it helps us. Thank you.
Commissioner Gentry, I know maybe you were saying that was when I looked at the penalties and violations, as you mentioned earlier with that. And they do have a little something in there where it says that, if there's shall be guilty of a misdemeanor, subject to prosecution and convicted shall be punished by fine not to exceed $500 or by imprisonment not to exceed 30 days or both in discretion of the court. And then each day that said solar energy systems constructed, maintain, or operate in violation of this ordinance shall constitute a separate and distinct offense. And so I'm not sure what the separate and distinct offense would be, but they got something in there. But I thought about that too as I was reading this, is what was going to happen if they're not following the ordinance. So, and I will also agree with you on the again, it's 150-foot setback. We keep it at 150-foot setback. We add 50 feet if we need it for the fire departments to go around the solar panels farm. And then also, I agree with you on the amount of acreage. I think 150 acres per solar farm would be a good number too, based on the fact that, what did we say our largest one was, Laura? Largest one.
Approximately 35 of panels right now on the
Right.
ground.
So again, that is to me, going from 35 to 150, that's a significant increase anyway. So that's just my thoughts right now.
The keeping the buffer as is. Lori, can you explain why you didn't want to adjust the fee schedule for the application process?
At this time, I was focusing primarily on the ordinance and not the fee schedule, knowing that the fee schedule change is coming up before you as part of your annual budget review. So I've compiled quite a bit of that data separately, because at a minimum, we will need to add in the fee if you agree with the annual inspection, which I think would catch some of the infractions out there. We would need to, at a minimum, add a fee for the annual inspection, as Stanley County does. I believe it's $300. But yes, looking at fees, I looked at Nash County and how theirs recently changed and looked at others. But specifically at this time, I did not bring a proposed fee change schedule. I was again waiting for the new fiscal year to present that as part of the budget. But if you would like me to go ahead and proceed with that, absolutely, I can carry that separately to you.
Well, I'd like to look at that along with this and the fee schedule all together at one time, if the board is interested in pursuing that, rather than waiting until our next budget adoption to have that addressed. Commissioner Gentry, you mentioned 150 acres maximum for level 3. I personally think 100 acres would be sufficient as opposed to 150. I mean, that's 100 acres is a lot. My other question is, Lori, people have ways of getting around ordinances. This is what they do for a living. My question regarding section 2.3, the maximum size of a level 3 solar panel shall not exceed 300 acres as measured in the immediate perimeter of panels and shall not be located within 1 mile lineage of an existing 3 solar system. Energy system. Why can't we include an existing level 1, 2, or 3 solar energy systems, not just exclusively to another level 3
If you
system?
include 1, you will be removing them from the county, because 1 is rooftop and they're
Okay.
all over the county.
All right, 2 then.
2, we have a mechanism by which to half acre and less than 10 acres. So level 2 that jumps out at me is Polywood and other industrial uses.
I think that's really intended, as I recall, to be a relatively small facility on the site with the main use of the property, like, for example, Polywood, to service that facility primarily.
For level 2, yes. And again, that language was something that I crafted at the planning board meeting that night as we were discussing all these different options. If the board doesn't feel comfortable with, obviously, the 300 acres, that can be reduced. It can be around the project site, not around the perimeter. It can be based on the acreage of the parcel. And absolutely, it could be reduced from 1 linear mile to a lower number if it would make you feel more comfortable.
No, I don't think the linear mile needs to be reduced, if anything increased, but I was just looking away for consultants from getting away from saying, all right, level 2 here. We can do a level, we can't connect to a level 3, but we can connect to a level 2, connect to a level 2 over here, and just kind of getting around the spirit of the ordinance.
Level 2 will be a little bit harder, I'll be honest, for staff to measure, just based on our existing records and existing data. Just because they're smaller by nature and we didn't single them out like we have the level 3s.
Okay.
That's why I suggested maybe reducing the measurement length.
I know we're working on the overall planning, zoning, the codes that we have now. So this still falls in rural conservation. My concern is, why is this in rural conservation? Still, I just think that, I don't think any industrial use should be considered in a rural conservation zoning. That needs to be changed, and I know you're working on it, but where are we right now with that process?
Way before early, haven't even brought you the proposals yet for the new ordinance. And if the board, again, this is based on the research or the data that I found across the state and talking with other department heads. But if the board says, you know what, thanks for the work you did, we want this only allowed in GI, then by all means, you can propose that as part of the changes. You can allow it by right or with special use or conditional use in whatever district the board would so choose.
I would like the board to take that under consideration, to remove the ability to have this in the RC zoning process. So at this time, Mr. Attorney, would the motion for a continuance be appropriate while we draft amendments?
Motion to postpone further consideration to some specified time certainly would be in order.
Any additional amendments to what's being proposed here today, is that going to require another public hearing?
No, sir. A public hearing has been advertised. In fact, was re-advertised because the board canceled the previous meeting because of weather. So the public hearing has happened. You opened it. It happened. It was closed. Citizens had abundant opportunity to say anything they wanted. And they made meaningful suggestions to you. You obviously heard those suggestions. There would be no requirement for an additional public hearing.
If I could really quickly, briefly go over some of the key changes I'm hearing so I can present you with hopefully a draft that you would like. So just briefly, I'm hearing that the 5-year engineering review, possibly bring it down to 2 or 3 years. To remove it from the RC zoning. And then I think they're 150 foot, keep the 150 foot buffer, keep in the 50 foot. So now you're creating a 200 foot setback. So change the setback to 200 feet. And then I think there's some discussion still on whether 150 or 100 acre max size are the key takeaways that I've gotten so far.
I like the suggestion at 100 acres.
100 acres.
The 100-foot idea.
Okay. And also lastly, try to really quick get a fee schedule change before your next meeting.
If it's something that we need to adjust before.
And I
we
did
implement it.
include that in your chart in the last column of the table that you received. I did research the fees, so if you have any that you ours seemed kind of comparable with other jurisdictions except for Nash County. But if there's something that you really want me to look at, please feel free to contact me and
Okay.
give me some direction on the fees.
Previous statement, I stated that I like the 100-foot proposal. I want to go along and change that now to 100-acre instead of 100-foot buffer. Drop from 150 to 100, which we seem to have 3 already on board here.
And just for clarification, the 100-foot maximum size, do you want it per parcel or as it's currently listed, measured around the project of the panels? And the reason I ask, because our existing projects were all on much larger parcels, like the 35-acre one was 35 acres on a 200-acre site. Or do you literally want them to subdivide and the project boundary be a max of 100 acres for the parcel? Does that make sense, or am I confusing?
Yes, I agree with that. Yes.
Maximum size of
Yes.
parcel. Gotcha. Just want to make sure I'm clear. I think I am. Is there anything else that I've missed?
No, is there anything else you want of us?
Nope, I
Okay.
think I have some direction and some work to do this week.
Okay.
Very good. Very good comments from all points of view, I believe. Several of those I had expressed to some board members previously, and I think we're all on the same page here. That will result in the best interests of the county as a whole, and I think it's a good move. Do we have a motion here? That
Continue.
it's already, all right. Any further discussion on the motion?
Motion to postpone to the board's next meeting.
Correct.
Yes.
February 7th.
So we have a motion, discussion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None motion carried.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
procedurally, let me
Yes,
just
sir.
explain what I think needs to happen.
Okay.
Between now and your next meeting, your planning director is going to do some work, as she said, and bring back to you, I think, 2 versions of this ordinance. The one that is before you now will still be before you at the next meeting. That was the one about which you advertised a public hearing. That'll still be before you. She is going to bring you a second version of the proposed ordinance with the additional amendments that the board just discussed and informally requested that she include in the next draft. So procedurally at your next meeting, I think what would be appropriate would be a motion to adopt the substitute ordinance for consideration. Then discuss that. And then if the board sees fit, vote to approve it. I think that's the proper procedure
At next meeting.
at your next
Yes.
meeting.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Lori. At this time in our meeting, we do have a public comment period set aside. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone signed up to speak?
Yes, we do. We have one individual signed up, Mr. Chris Weaver of Saddlefield Farm Road, Timberlake.
New year.
Happy New Year to you.
In December's meeting, I came to you and I spoke to you about the news from the EDC out of Chatham County that they were being considered for a semiconductor facility. It was nice of them to let the public know that they were under consideration. They have now let the public know that they are no longer under consideration. I'm curious if we'll ever get that kind of notification here about anything going on with our mega site. It's a little frustrating. I was also informed that after I left that meeting, that there was quite a bit of discussion about some stuff that I had been trying to talk with you guys about for a year. Notably the mega site, stuff going on up there, or actually stuff not going on up there. I'm sorry that I missed that. And I did not go back and watch it. Apparently it was pretty thrilling TV. But it mostly was circulating around the fact that nobody could find these emails. Well, I did the FOIA and you guys complied with the FOIA. It was 2.6 gigabytes of information that you guys sent to me. Maybe you couldn't find things about Volvo electric truck batteries, but I did, and I have them. And in my haste to get here this morning with ice and snow and a lot of animals calling my name, I left everything behind. So I don't have them to pass out to you, but I do have them. I will give them to everybody. In fact, I'm going to be posting a bunch of those to Person County Local here in just a minute. I've got a list here of a timeline that is absolutely stunning about poor performance between members of this board and bureaucrats elected for the county, appointed to the county as far as our mega site goes. Look, former commissioners all voted to start that process going. If you guys don't want to do anything up there, throw in the towel. You know, we can't get a sign up there. Chatham County they'll tell us when somebody's looking at them, and they'll tell us when they lost a prospect. We can't even get that. The one on Volvo, that was from the Timmons Group. They were a selected vendor for Volvo. They reached out, they got nothing. They reached out again, and they finally got a reply back. The reply was, "Thank you, we'll let you know." On a huge prospect like that. And Kyle, they do the trucks right up in Virginia. We wouldn't need an interstate. They would leave up there and then go north. Really nice, low traffic. I don't know. If we're not going to do anything with the mega site, let's throw in the towel, because I know somebody who is willing to do something with the mega site. If we're not going to do it, let's throw in the towel. Former commissioners all voted. The citizens of this county deserve some industry that's going to get us through Joe Biden's long, dark economic winter. And we're just on the edge of it. And I love Hollywood. They're awesome. I have their chairs. I purchased their chairs. But I don't think the economy here is going to be supported by the chair industry, the plastic chair industry. We need some other things that are going to root us down and get us through Joe Biden's long, dark winter. And if we're not going to use the mega site, then let's get rid of it, because there are people waiting in line to do so. Have a great day. Do I need to hang around for anything? Have a great day.
Item number 3 on our agenda is discussion, adjustment, approval of the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve or adjust? A motion to approve the consent agenda. Any further discussion? And all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none, motion carried. New business, item number 4 is Community Services Block Grant Application Overview. It's Frank's.
She's joining us remotely. She's joining us remotely.
Oh, okay,
today.
all right.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. My name is Alexis Franks. I'm with Telemon Corporation. Hopefully you can all hear me okay.
Yes, we can.
Great. I apologize for not being able to attend in person this morning, also due to the snow and inclement weather delay with our school systems here in Granville County. But I am here to just provide an overview of our 20 program year 22-23 community service block grant application. This program serves to support low-income families with education and training, as well as other support services and access to wraparound services as funded through North Carolina's Office of Economic Opportunity. So we have specific goals around a number of families that we serve for Person, Caswell, and Rockingham counties in obtaining employment, securing housing, and providing educational and employment supports, also in the form of work experience internships. For program year 22-23, we have been allocated $422,503 to serve all 3 counties. The allocation for Person County is $97,694. With these funds, we are proposing to serve 32 Person County families, a total of 140 families across the 3 county service area. And the biggest changes to this year's application is that previously we had a staff that was part-time or full-time actually in the county. We were located at Piedmont Community College. And since COVID, since the pandemic, we have been working remotely. This coming program year, we are looking to add staff back to Person County, at least in a part-time capacity. We will work with Piedmont Community College again to see if we're able to obtain space there. We will also be working with the NC Works Career Center in Oxford on a weekly basis to receive referrals for individuals that live in Person County. Lastly, we also received in July of 2020 $395,000 for emergency assistance for those affected by coronavirus. We are still currently seeking to serve the families with this funding in Person County. So that is separate from this application, but we do also have those as supplementary funds. And I'm able to answer any questions as needed.
This is
Board member
Commissioner,
questions?
I'm sorry. This
Go
is
ahead.
Commissioner Gentry. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. I
Okay,
can.
great. How many people do you serve in Person County? How many families or homes do you serve in Person County?
As of this program year, we have served 20 Person County families. Our goal for this year is to serve 75 families total across the 3 county area. Our allocation increased from last year to this year, which will account for the increase in the number of Person County families that we are proposing to serve. But allocations are usually based around unemployment numbers, population numbers for each county, and a number of other factors as well. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, no, just wanted to know the number. And then the goals that are set for each family, I assume that you make an assessment, set goals, and then you measure them as you go along.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. With our services, we customize based on what the family is in need of. So if there is a need for childcare or transportation assistance, or even educational supports, whether it's a short-term certification or up to a degree, we select which services are provided based on what that customer needs.
And is there a I don't know how to put this, a graduation from the program that people succeed and we get them, heading in a better direction?
We don't necessarily have a graduation from our program, but we do develop an individualized employment plan with them. Once that employment plan, the goals on that employment plan have been reached, at that time they are able to exit from our program. We will continue to perform informal follow-up after they've completed all of those goals, or if they need to come back for other services in the future, they're able to come back and re-enroll.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Any further board member questions, comments? So we need a motion on this.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? None motion carried. Thank you very much. Item number 5 on the agenda is website redesign update by Mr. Perrier.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
In front of you, you should have a copy of the presentation that I'm going to have up behind you during this. As you know, Person County has engaged with a vendor, Granicus, for a website redesign. The goal of today's presentation is just to update you with the progress thus far and to provide a few samples of that new design. A couple of key points. At the beginning of the project, Granicus recommended forming a small committee to provide direction through the process. That committee consists of Assistant County Manager Catherine Cathy, HR Director Miranda Harrison, myself, and one other IT staff member, Kelly Horn. The next step was to collect information about our current website from citizens and other users via surveys. This also included having 5 users record themselves performing tasks to provide feedback related to ease of use of the current website. Granicus then provided heat maps to show which items on the homepage received the most clicks over a period of time, as well as a list of the most accessed pages. And I'm going to show you a copy of the heat map here in just a minute. The results of those items were used to heavily influence the design, flow, and functionality of the redesigned website, which you will see shortly. The overall goal of this redesign is to provide a website with more up-to-date information, greater communication opportunities, and an overall better user experience. Our current estimated completion is the end of April of 2022. All right, so this is a little difficult to see, but this is the heat map. What you're looking for are the yellow, red, and orange areas, all right? So this is part of the heat map that was provided to us. The yellow and red indicate the most clicked items, which were employment, GIS, and the search feature. So employment is actually right under the green bar that you see up there now at the very top. The search feature, of course, is a little bit down on the right-hand side there. And then GIS is the most clicked there, the bottom option to the right of where it says RFQ. It's that section there. All right, taking all of that information into account, Granicus provided us with a mock-up of the proposed homepage design. Again, this is a little difficult to see because I was trying to get everything I could on one page, so the next slide is actually going to show a little bit more of the homepage. But I wanted to provide you with an overall view of the page before I go into detail about some of the subsections and features. This design reflects a much more modern and clean presentation of the homepage while preserving Person County's identity. And this is just a little bit more of that homepage with the news section and calendar item. All right, so this is a close-up of the top section of the homepage. As you can see, we've streamlined the menu, enhanced what's called the hero image, carousel, and provided more buttons for direct access to the most accessed pages on our site, all while maintaining the modern, clean presentation. One of the biggest complaints we received from the surveys was that people don't know where to go to find certain information. A great example of that came from one of the user recordings. The participant was asked to find requirements to obtain a marriage license and was unable to do so. Didn't occur to them because they don't know the inner workings of county government that the Register of Deeds is where they need to go for that. So what we found was that the website menu has previously been structured by department, which is fine if you know the functions of each department within county governments in North Carolina, but not so much if you're an everyday citizen looking for specific information. We've realized that and revised the menu so that it's now done by function rather than department. So you'll see government, residents, business, visitors, about us, and then there's some subpages underneath that. Again, a little difficult to see, it's kind of small, but this is just reflecting what it looks like when you hover over certain items. This does not reflect the menu structure that I just mentioned. Instead, this is just to kind of show you what it looks like, how they designed it for the hover over certain items. You can see the color change on elected officials, the service finder at the top, and then the hover over residents there. All right, next up is the service finder. It allows citizens to easily find information by topic. They simply select an item on the left, a subcategory in the middle, and then they are provided with information regarding that topic. This feature is available at the top of every page and should be a great help to those unsure of where to find specific information. This is just one of the ways we're trying to make it a little easier to find stuff. Next up, one of the most used items, search function. As you can see, it's been enhanced to provide buttons for quick searches of the most recently searched for items, or I'm sorry, of the most searched for items overall. They are completely customizable by county staff, and we can change those at any time. So if we have something coming up that we want to put a specific search term in there for to kind of draw people to that, we can put that in there, or whatever you guys would like. Since it is one of the most clicked items on the homepage, we were excited about those new search buttons as a new feature for us. All right, next up. Actually, this is last. This is an example of what an internal departmental page looks like. It's not any of our data other than the stuff across the top there. But this is simply to show what the general structure and layout of a subpage would be under the new design. So you got the menu structure on the left, the image spanning across the entire page, and then your general information in the bottom there. So that is a brief overview of the new website design. Any thoughts or questions you would like me to take back to the committee or the vendor?
Yes, sir, please.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me if I'm wrong,
Mhm.
but I'm thinking that at one of our last couple of meetings we've had, that the website is partially up and running.
So the website is up and functional. Yes, sir.
Okay, our job listings.
Job listings are posted through NeoGov. That's done through the HR department. That's a third-party website, but we do link to that. That's what that employment link goes to.
So are they listed?
Yes, sir. They should be listed. Yes, sir.
Perfect. Thank you, because there's a lot of openings upstairs.
Yes, sir. I've got 2 of them.
Crisp new design. Thanks. It's been long overdue. Thank you.
Yes, I think our current website, I may be wrong, but I want to say it was 2014 was when that design was done. So it's been a long time coming.
Is this new one going to be something that's going to be easier to update and keep going forward so we don't get stagnant again?
So the back end is essentially the same as what we're currently using. It's the same vendor. What we are trying to do internally is to try to get departments more involved and essentially at some point create a website policy for what you should do to update pages, how regularly content should be updated, get people more involved, and how the content should look when it's posted so that we can standardize instead of having each department doing their own thing. My department, of course, is available to assist anytime anyone has questions or issues. I think you guys have posted a PIO position as well, which we're trying to bring a little bit into this as well to help with some consistency and availability of data.
Yeah.
Further questions? Anyone? Thank you for your efforts. I think they'll be well received by the public. Looks very good.
Thank you, Chris.
And this is informational only, so it takes no action by the board. Item number 6, appointments to boards and committees. Ms. Reeves.
Good morning. I'd like to present to you in your packet interested citizen applications for current vacancies that have been received to our office through an ad we published in the local newspaper, as well as we have a posting on our county website. I would recommend the board nominate and appoint as deemed appropriate through applications. And I would like to present those for action by a separate committee if that's acceptable to the board. The first one we have would be the Airport Commission. We do have one at-large position available. We do have 2 applications. Norman Carton, requested appointment, as well as Henry Newell Jr., requested reappointment. Would the board like to take action on these applications?
Second
Excuse me?
person, who was the second applicant?
Henry Newell,
Henry.
who is currently sitting in that seat,
Right.
has reapplied.
Newell.
Have a motion to appoint Henry Newell to reappointment. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
All right, for your next consideration, we have the Environmental Issues Advisory Committee. This committee is landscape where we have a citizen from each township within our organization. And we currently have a number of townships vacancy, but we did get new interest. Mr. Larry Williams has requested appointment from the Bush Fork Township, as well as Mr. Joe Hodges requested appointment from the Woodsdale Township. So these two are up for appointment.
Move to approve both applications.
Have a motion to approve both. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none motion carried.
Thank you. Our next one for review is the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council. We had a lot of reappointments for this one. As you can see from your packet, Ricky Hughes has requested reappointment representing the Chief of Police. The Aaron Lappin is requesting appointment representing the Sheriff. Alyssa Black is requesting reappointment representing the District Attorney. Ashley Stone is requesting reappointment representing the Social Services Director. John Hill is requesting reappointment as the representative for Parks and Recreation. And we have one citizen who is requesting reappointment, Louise Wright Oliver. Would the board care to take action on all of these applications in one motion?
Motion to approve all of the reappointments that you just listed, all the applicants.
Thank you.
Motion to approve all applicants as listed. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, none motion carried.
Thank you. The next one for consideration is our Person Area Transportation System Board of Directors. Ms. Kimberly Nichols is requesting appointment to be a representative for the Health Department. Ms. Cindy Chandler is requesting appointment to be in the designation for a medical related entity.
Motion to approve both applicants.
Have a motion to approve both applicants. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, none motion carried.
Thank you. And the last one for consideration is the Tourism Development Authority. We had one position available. Sally Humphreys, who was sitting in that position, has requested reappointment.
Motion to reappoint Sally Humphries.
Motion to approve the applicant. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none motion carried.
Thank you. That's
Thank
all I
you
have.
very much. Item number 7 on the agenda is an amendment to the resolutions establishing 2022 schedule of regular meetings for the Board of Commissioners. Ms. York.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is essentially an updated housekeeping item for you. Back in November, you adopted your schedule of meetings for this current year. And due to the changes with the elections that have been proposed, we need to adjust the location of your meetings. So we are asking for you to change your March 7th meeting to meet. It can now meet in the auditorium. You were previously upstairs in the boardroom, because as you know, this room serves as a one-stop polling place. And then your May 2nd meeting would also be impacted. That would need to go to the boardroom now, rather than have that held in the auditorium. So those are the two location changes for your meetings. With the upcoming retreat, we also wanted to ask you for a preference on location. We, on the meeting schedule, had proposed the FEMA shelter as that location for your retreat, but the upstairs Kirby space is also available if the board would prefer to meet there. So essentially 3 changes are reflected in this newly proposed calendar in your packet.
comment. You may have seen on the news that there is some legislation where they may push back the primary again to be in June. So again, if that does take place, we would come back before you probably again with location changes. But as we know it today, we want it to reflect or update the meeting schedule to be accurate and up to your desire. If you would like to hold the meetings in this room when possible, as well as the location change of the retreat, if you so desire.
Thanks.
Thoughts or recommendations? Anybody?
I would like to recommend that we move upstairs. Keep it all here in-house.
You're making a motion or you're recommending that we change the meeting schedule where we're upstairs full time?
No, just for the election.
Oh, okay. Yes.
So that would impact your May 2nd meeting. That one would need to go up to the boardroom, assuming that the election is conducted in May.
That's right. The primary,
That's right.
Okay, everyone clear on that motion?
Does anyone have any preference for your annual retreat? If you care to have it in the as scheduled FEMA shelter room or to move it to the Kirby?
I believe the Kirby is a more inviting environment. I would vote for the Kirby.
Okay. So the motion we're asking today is to relocate the retreat date on February 22nd. Your meeting would be held upstairs in the Kirby Main Hall. On March 7th, we would have your regular scheduled meeting here in the auditorium. And then as of now, we would hold the May 2nd, 2022 regular scheduled meeting in your boardroom upstairs. Yep. That would be the motion for today.
It's March 7th.
March 7th would now be in the auditorium. May 2nd would be upstairs
In the boardroom.
unless a further change comes down.
Yep.
And the retreat would be moved to the Kirby.
Make a motion
Sure.
to approve the changes.
Have a motion. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion as stated, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None motion carried. Thank you. Item number 8 on the agenda is nuisance ordinance discussion. Ms. Oakley.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So I was here before you in September of last year to discuss a couple of items. One was a junkyard ordinance amendment versus a nuisance ordinance. And another item tied into that was an existing violation that's kind of been ongoing out on Cedar Grove Church. So I did just want to give you the update, if you have not heard, that the violation on Cedar Grove Church Road is now in compliance with the planning department, with both our junkyard ordinance and our planning and zoning ordinance. I believe the state is still working with the adjacent property owner to address some issues, but that site is in compliance with our department currently, which leads us to the second discussion. So we talked about possibly amending the junkyard ordinance and including an amortization schedule with the board. And at that time, you also asked us to maybe explore some other avenues, because if we were to amend the existing junkyard ordinance, then existing citizens who have come into compliance under that ordinance would no longer be grandfathered. So they would come under a new amortization schedule and have X number of years to come into compliance with whatever revisions that we make. So staff discussed the issue with the county attorney's office. At that time, he was not available. So we spoke with one of his law partners, Kevin Hornick, and I included his email in your packet. And we had some email dialogue back and forth with him, and he suggested implementing a separate nuisance ordinance. I've worked with nuisance ordinances in the city. Roxborough has one. A lot of times you see them in the city, but they are also available for the county. And staff feels that the nuisance ordinance might be the best avenue to enforce junk-like conditions or violations while still allowing the individuals who previously brought their property into compliance to stay into compliance. So I just wanted to kind of update the board on where we stood at that, where we are at that. So the way we see it is that we can still go forward with a possible text amendment to the junkyard ordinance if the board were to wish and to direct staff. We could draft a new nuisance ordinance. I will say that Mr. Hornick stated that his law firm could draft the nuisance ordinance, which I would be very much in favor of. Not only is our plate kind of full, but as I said, I have not worked with nuisance ordinances in the county realm before, and he does have experience with that. And then the other option is just to leave everything as is, leave the junkyard ordinance as it currently is, and to just not explore the option of a nuisance ordinance. So I just wanted to come back before the board and kind of update you and see which path we should take as staff, or the direction you would like us to proceed.
Suggestions?
I guess I'm wondering what's the best course of action based on what's on our plate right now? What we have working well? And if it's not, we need to make adjustments or add a nuisance. Policy is that the reason? Because what we have right now is not protecting or not working. We need something else.
So our current junkyard ordinance essentially allows the property owner two options, and that is to abate the violation, which is to clean it up and remove the junk, or they can screen it behind a 6-foot tall privacy fence or a combination of fence and evergreen shrubs. And so, we're getting some complaints about, or we have still been receiving complaints about that particular property on Cedar Grove Church. And so that's why the state has also become involved, the Environmental Health Division, the Solid Waste Division, to see what can be done on that particular property. It is a bit extreme. And staff, we went out there in December, the Planning Department and Inspections Department, and we walked to the site, and it's not your normal violation site. But as I stated in the beginning, as the ordinance is currently written, it is in compliance. We can't do anything. So
Okay, so the addition of a nuisance ordinance does what? How does that affect it? How does that affect this particular situation?
And I asked again, in nuisance ordinances that I've worked in the past, you're typically looking at minimum housing, high grass, again, stuff that you'd see, for example, in the city of Roxborough. So I asked the attorney's office, help me with the county interpretation. And he said that the general statutes allows county to define, regulate, prohibit, abate acts, emissions, conditions detrimental to the health, safety, or public welfare of the citizens and the peace and dignity of the county, and may define and abate nuisances. So automatically, I'm going to think of like white goods and white appliances. Obviously, safety, that's the immediate one that comes to me, but there's others too that would fall under the public welfare and safety. So it's a little bit of a different avenue than your just standard junk ordinance.
So we wouldn't want this environmental, we would just want a nuisance to cover a plethora of things besides environmental issues.
Right, that is allowed under general statutes.
Okay.
As the plaintiff on that site at Cedar Grove, I understand that they were trying to get environmental health involved. Has any result came from that? From the runoff from that property?
So on a previous visit that Angie and I went out, we went out with the environmental health staff. And I believe that the option was given, correct me if I'm wrong, Angie, too, that they could test the water, the well water. I think that was the only option. And I hate to speak on behalf of environmental health, and that person has since retired as well. But I know that an option was given to the adjoining property owner to test their well water. And I believe there's different tests that you can also do. Some are more comprehensive than others. And then at a state level, I know that the neighbor contacted both the Solid Waste Department and the Environmental Health Division, both water and waste. And I think he's having a little bit more success with the waste department. But so he has contacted county and city departments as far as health, which we're limited to, obviously from planning and zoning, we're looking at it from a different aspect.
Yes.
Few words from me. Our bright young associate has spent some time working with Lori, Kevin Hornick, on this issue. There never is an easy, simple solution to this range of issues. In my previous life, I have attempted to work with legislative committees at least 5 or 6 times on all of this, how to authorize municipalities and counties to address and resolve issues like these. There are lots of statutory provisions. This concept of nuisance is an old concept in the English and American common law, and there are lots of statutory provisions in our state statutes. And I agree with Kevin Hornick in our firm that, and I recommend to you all, that probably the best way to approach this and give our staff some new and additional capability to address and resolve issues like this is through a new ordinance, a nuisance ordinance, to go address the problems. And we can draft it. It's not particularly complicated. When I say nuisance, think about some of the things that the planning director mentioned: broken down motor vehicles. She said white goods. Think about old refrigerators that still have a door, and think about in particular, and we're talking about general public dangers to the public health and safety and to individuals. Think about children and animals and their curiosity. Getting trapped in or injured in a broken down motor vehicle or closed in an old refrigerator. We want to avoid that the best we can, and that's the purpose of a nuisance ordinance.
And I agree. I think we do need to move forward with establishing a nuisance ordinance and have staff work with the county attorney to prepare an ordinance to come back to this board. Mainly, I spoke with Lori a few months ago about, public endangerment, especially with young kids getting trapped in an old automobile in the trunk, in an old freezer, old refrigerator. And if you ever have been to that site, if you haven't, I would encourage you to go to that site and you will know exactly what I'm referring to.
And I certainly agree. It proves a point that what we're doing is not working. We can develop these guidelines, but then there are those that are grandfathered in. I think this particular site has been looked at for probably 10 years. It's an ongoing issue and proves the point that we do need an ordinance to work with and around such nuisances going forward. So, but again, I think we put a lot of effort and time into it over a long period of time. And as Mr. Perrier said, all you have to do is drive by, and you don't have to take much time in driving by to see what everyone's talking about. And I'm sure each of you would feel the same if it were next door to you. So I think that's the proper procedure to take.
To make a
Sure.
motion that we draft a nuisance ordinance for consideration by the board.
By the
For
attorney.
clarification, can we say that the county attorney's office will draft and staff will
And
assist?
that
Yes.
the county attorney's office will draft and assist staff in developing such ordinance.
Thank you.
Haven't heard the motion. Any discussion? One. All in favor of the motion as stated, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carried.
Mr. Chairman,
you.
board members, just to let you know, when we were out there on the site in December, I did let the property owner know that there was a possibility of a new ordinance. So he worked on clearing a very small portion, but I told him that there was the possibility of this new ordinance coming that was going to impact his property, so that he should start working on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 9, human resources software proposal. Ms. York. Ms.
I'll get us
Harrison.
started, and then I have Ms. Harrison here from the our new HR director who can speak a little bit more about this item. But we had sent out an email to you a few weeks ago, letting you know that it was an email from Ellis, our attorney. We have been evaluating the need for some new software enhancements in our HR software suite. So we have talked with NeoGov, which is our current vendor, and we found out late in the calendar year that their pricing for 2022 was significantly increasing. So we tried to work creatively to try to lock in the 2021 pricing arrangement for the software and wanted to bring that to the board for consideration. Typically, we would fund a purchase like this during the budget process, but because the costs were going up so substantially, we wanted to bring this for a discussion to see if it would be worth having a mid-year appropriation to purchase this software so that we might save some taxpayers' dollars. Miranda will go over the numbers for you so you can see what the savings is. This is a 3-year installment purchase essentially that we would be incurring. It does also have some recurring costs with it. So I wanted to make sure that we are clear about that. The county attorney had advised us through an informal bidding process that we could sign an agreement to lock in the pricing. We did not commit any funds to this at all. It would require board approval to make a purchase this significant. And so we have also wanted some time to explore the funding source for this. And as we're working through the American Rescue funding, that guidance was significantly changed about a week ago. And we do believe that this would allow, this purchase would be eligible for use of those funds. But in order to move forward at this time, we would need to make an appropriation from fund balance and then could potentially reimburse ourselves with the rescue funding that we're getting. So a complicated issue, but timing was of the essence so that we could lock down some savings and then come back and ask the board if this is something that you would like to consider purchasing. So with that introduction, Miranda, if you'll talk to about the product and the numbers for us, and then we'll answer any questions that you might have.
Certainly. Thank you. Thank you. I am excited to be here. Actually, this is the first time that I'm getting to talk to you guys, and I'm really pretty excited about having the opportunity to look at the county operations. And really, my staff has heard me say that we have a really great opportunity for efficient operations in government and contributing to that. But when I started to look and when my team started to talk to me about our current operations in HR, it was quite clear. And actually, from what Chris was saying too, that employment is a big thing that our community members are looking at on our site. So not only are we supporting internal customers in HR, but additionally external customers as well. And it is getting to the point to where we need to start looking at how we can do this in the most effective, efficient way possible. We currently have NeoGov helping us with applicant tracking. They've been a wonderful partner for us. So when we started to look at options for improving our operations and considering other avenues for getting the work done that wouldn't require so much hands-on touching of each process, NeoGov was one of the vendors that came to mind. So we reached out to them, and they have a platform that has multiple modules within it. And this proposal essentially discusses multiple of the modules that we felt were a good fit. So they have a performance management module. They have a onboarding and offboarding module. There is also a learn platform that they have with content. Some learning management systems are just that. They assist in managing any content that you want to put in there, and other vendors provide that content for you. NeoGov is one that provides content for us. And then there is also a single sign-on option to assist our employees in going between these different modules and not having to remember 10 different ways to get into this and 10 different passwords and login information. We also told them that it would be very vital for us to be able to have a system that would work with our current HR information system that we have through Tyler Technologies, because one of the other things that we were looking at is their module called eForms. So eForms allows us to do electronic management of paper processing. And that would be a significant savings on time for our HR employees and for many employees throughout the county, in fact, because it could all be done electronically. So what we decided to do, as you know, I started in October and found out through speaking with the HR team and then through speaking with lots of employees and also in speaking with County Manager York about what our priorities were for the HR department. And it became quite clear that certain future priorities, such as providing quality training for employees and even being flexible to the potential need for remote workforce options, was not possible without having some sort of partner in this. And so this is something that would have been proposed in the budget cycle. And then NeoGov said, we have this unique thing that we're doing through the end of the year because a lot of other counties and cities have been able to utilize these funds that are currently available. And so we are kind of providing for the first time a discount if you have a 3-year agreement with us, that we will discount it by approximately 50% over those 3 years. Now, the deadline was fast approaching, so we said, what can we do? We cannot allocate these funds. It has to come before our commissioners to allocate any funds, and reached out to Ellis, who looked over the proposed contract that they gave us, which said we could lock in the price and we would be given 60 days to continue to review and to bring it before the commissioners and say, is this something that you foresee in the future being beneficial for the county? And I think the other reason why it was so vital for us to lock in that price is because this isn't something that was a shiny new object that we might want right now just because it's on discount. This is something that we're going to want going forward anyway. So we thought it should be best for us to look at opportunities to get it at the lowest possible cost. So we have some benefits, which I can go over with you guys. If you want some more information, you have some information in your packet about some of the benefits of the different modules of NeoGov, and we could certainly go over those. But I also want to touch on something that was brought up about funding sources. We spoke with, and the finance team has been phenomenal in helping, the IT team has been phenomenal in helping look for funding options for this project. And Amy, finance director for Person County, has identified a couple of potential sources for this that are very strong contenders for paying for the entirety of the project. And our IT director, Chris, has come up with a funding source, potential funding source that would assist us as a third option for paying for this. So we have 3 good options on the table of how we can pay for some of this. And Chris's option that we have so far would pay for that first installment to provide us with some time to get other funding sources in place. And within your packet, you have information about the costs. So the cost without discounts would be over $182,000 over the 3 years. And the cost with discounts, it comes to to 90,000 rounded. And the other piece of this puzzle, yes, there would be ongoing costs to sustain this. We have agreed to have an ongoing cost to sustain our relationship with NeoGov for their applicant tracking system. So it would go along with that contract. And there is a implementation cost. So that will not be something that we would need to have in the future. That would just be for this individual project. And then you will see that there is a there's a 3-year plan here, and the first year would have for just the platform itself would have $21,513.90, and then the second year $50,199.10, and then the third year is $64,541.70. And then there is the prorated cost of setup, which is $12,500. So that $12,500 would be in that first year as well. The other thing that I requested from NeoGov in their proposal is I said, this timing doesn't work for us. We cannot be negotiating with you at end of year. We need to be looking at when it will fit with our budget cycle. And so their proposal would align us with their budget cycle, or with our budget cycle, excuse me. So by the time that we get to the end of that 3-year agreement, we will be on cycle so that this can come through the normal budget process in the future for you to review. I'm going to pause there for any questions or thoughts or any other aspects that you'd like me to dive into a little bit deeper.
Mr. Chairman, if I may add, first of all, I want to commend the county manager and the HR director for preserving the board's legislative discretion to fund these needs if you see fit. They looked ahead, they identified some future needs in personnel administration that could be greatly enhanced in their opinion in a cost-effective way with these additional IT capabilities. You know, you can waste a lot of money with IT services and capability there. Anytime you get into an IT project, it's a combination of goods and services. The software in whatever form it comes, licenses, whatever, you download the stuff, or in the old days, it came on a disk, you loaded it into your computer system. So goods in one way, but services, there's a continuing relationship with the IT company to provide training on how to use the software and all of that. We were all working on this during the holiday period. The objective of the staff was to present it to the board, but to preserve the significant savings. But something had to be done with the deadline of December 31st. We had to comply with the procurement requirements of the state statutes. Counties have a lot of flexibility in procurement, but not unlimited flexibility. And we figured out which of those alternatives made sense. And as county manager said, it's the informal bid process, calling around, seeking or talking to several vendors, figuring out whether they are in a position to submit a bid to meet the needs. So that was done. But we had some contract requirements, and we had some requirements under the Local Government Budget and Fiscal Control Act. So we involved the finance director in this discussion too. You all in the budget ordinance have given the county manager a good bit of authority to execute some county contracts up to specified amounts. But that also has limitations. Remember, one requirement of the Budget and Fiscal Control Act says that any contract has to have on its face a certification by the finance officer that funds have been appropriated and there's a remaining unencumbered balance in the appropriation to fund the contract. Obviously, no funds had been appropriated here. So we worked with this potential vendor, and they offered something that the HR director just mentioned, a 60-day out provision, so to speak. We put this in the email message that I sent to you all. We wanted to be open and transparent, but let you know what we were doing. The county manager, because I told her I believed went with the contract that was before us in the shape that we had gotten it into working with the vendor. She had authority to execute that contract, but only with that 60-day out provision to preserve your legislative discretion. So this is before you now to give direction to the staff, whether you are interested in continuing with this or not. And if you say no, that you're not interested in appropriating the funds to cover the cost of this contract, county manager simply under this contract can send a notice of termination by the end of February, and that's it. No cost, no obligation. So that's where we are. This is before you, just to provide direction to the staff about what you'd like to do.
One other thing that I'd like to add is that I asked NeoGov, they're really an expert in this space in local government and providing these types of services for local government. Certainly, when you think about a performance management system or a learning management system, there are other options, other vendors out there. So I asked them to tell me a little bit more about who their other customers are. And they have 148 North Carolina city, county, and special district customers. And of those, 99 are using at least 2 NeoGov systems. So 99 of our competitors are using at least 2 of the systems. We're using one of theirs right now. So we are one of the 148. But when we look at trying to reduce turnover, which their onboarding platform and other studies have shown, not through NeoGov, but other onboarding platforms can decrease turnover by up to 29–30%. That when we look at things like that, and we look at, employees are looking for a performance management system that can give them information to help them learn how to do better at their jobs and be more engaged. And we're looking at things like how long and frustrating a process it can be to wait for papers to come back on things. These are all things that discourage employees. And we have 99 other competitors in local government who are saying, nope, I'm going to put something in place so that we can be a top employer and so that we can retain our employees and encourage new folks to come into our county, and or in this case, potentially some of them are cities, and provide a good work environment for them with some systems that support them. And that's why I wanted to bring this before you.
Any questions, board members?
So, Manager York, I'm assuming with your level of expertise and your knowledge of having worked with this vendor that this is a good move, if you wouldn't want it to have moved forward with it. So I trust that,
Yes.
that insight on your part.
Thank you.
This NeoGov, I don't have any problem with the fact that they had a fire sale at the end of the year. I mean, people buy appliances by the end of the year and the model's gone the next year. My concern is the support for this software going to be continuing? I mean, it's just not old technology. It's going to be an ongoing process so that for the next 3 years, it will be fantastic. Now, they know government budget cycles.
Right.
So, but a 50% saving is a 50% saving. And I think it's significant. And I think we need to be competitive. The marketplace is changing. Remote working is changing, and everything is changing, and we need to stay up on top of the technology, is pricey as it is, we have to do it. So I'm in support of this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Gentry. And also, one question that you asked is, will we continue to receive support? We have multiple vendors that we work with throughout the county for a variety of things. And many of the people who have worked with NeoGov would also say that they are one of our top vendors. They have always been responsive to us. They have always been willing to work with us. There are other vendors who you have to buy their newest version. We could use, Microsoft platforms as an example, right? You have to buy the newest platform. That's not the case with NeoGov. They are providing updates on a regular basis, and there is always somebody who is available. And in fact, I reached out to them separately with regard to our applicant tracking, and I said, I have a question about this thing, and they responded to me within the day. And I said, I still am not understanding, and they decided that they would get on a call with me. And this was before we were considering them for other products. And they got on a call with me and showed me, and they noticed that there were a couple of things that weren't available within their platform. They contacted me a week later. It is now on the agenda to be implemented in the second quarter of this year. So they're very responsive. They take into consideration what consumers of their product are asking for, and to build that in to their systems going forward.
Mr. Chair, based on the expertise of our staff and what they are recommending, and also the cost savings that we are seeing here with this program, I'm in support of it as well.
Further.
Motion that we proceed.
Which option are you going with?
Well, that should be
The
the
one she's
motion, and then
offering.
we can have more discussion.
One Heidi's suggestion.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion that we accept the proposal that the staff has recommended we go forward with.
Do we have a
And
motion on the
purchasing-
floor? Further discussion, questions? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion as stated, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, motion carried.
So, Mr. Chairman, let me tell you what I believe happens now. I believe the staff, what the county manager will bring to you, a proposed mid-year budget amendment
Yes.
for the board to appropriate the funds. And then with the funds in hand, we will work further with the company, develop a reformed contract, in other words, that has these savings in it. And at that point, the finance officer certainly can and will apply for pre-audit certification and make it a binding contract. Those two things will happen.
Thank you. I'm clear on that.
Thank you. I'm
Hey.
really excited about this.
Thank
Really
you.
Appreciate your consideration. And I'll hang out up here because I'm your next agenda item.
Yes, item number 10, criminal history record check ordinance, repeal or replace by Ms. Harrison again.
So in line with effective, efficient government, we have before you a criminal history record check ordinance repeal and replace request. And again, I connected with county attorney, and he advised that rather than amend it, repealing it and replacing it is really what we would like to do so that we don't have a ton of amendments to a particular ordinance at any given time. What is happening with us right now is that we have the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, Division of Criminal Information Network, shorthand is SBI DCI, that is performing fingerprinting background checks for potential county employees. So for a candidate that has been selected to be provided a conditional offer of employment. That vendor is currently, well, historically, they were taking about 2 weeks or less to get us the results back. And during that time, we were also conducting our reference checks and getting the results back for drug screens, pre-employment drug screens, that sort of a thing, or any other relevant pre-screening processes. Currently, it is taking 4 to 6 weeks for us to get results back. We are losing applicants in the process. As we know, there is a staffing shortage. So when somebody wants to work, we don't want them waiting 6 weeks, sitting there wanting to work for the county and deciding, this is taking so long and I just want to work so much, I might go to another employer instead. And that is in fact happening. So this proposal would just slightly open up the language to allow us to select another vendor that our criteria would be the same, that we would say that they would have to be somebody who is well-versed in conducting criminal history record checks and have a good reputation in the industry for doing so. We did some pre-work on the HR team to determine if other resources were potentially available. And there are quite a few that other counties and cities are using, other than the current system that our ordinance provides for us. And those other sources are taking less than a week in turnaround time for their background check processes. So before you is the ordinance, which, as Lori had mentioned, we love to rely on the experts in the room. So contacted Ellis and said, could you take a look at this and what would be the most appropriate updates or changes you would recommend so that we could utilize another vendor in such instance as this, where our process is inefficient. And he has provided the language that is before you today. So I would ask that you consider making those changes, and then we can move forward with getting employees on staff at Person County.
I have a motion on the floor, further discussion. Anybody? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carried. Your job's easy.
Thank you. I like it. I'll come back someday. We'll check in someday. That's what we're. Take care of that.
For chairman's report, I only have a couple of things. One, it noted something previously about Via and Cardinal, or Via buying out Cardinal. Well, there was no buyout because it was not a publicly traded or owned healthcare system. Cardinal and Via merged. All assets, everything from Cardinal went to Via. And my last report was that Cardinal had about 850 employees, and probably in the 650 range or greater of those had moved to Via. Others had found other employment. So that was good news. And that transition was finalized, and we are officially, as of January 1st, with Via Health. And I've been appointed to that regional board for Via. So again, it's a transition and things are moving along, I believe, very well, because that is incredibly complicated. And at the same time, we want to ensure that those members, clients, get the service they deserve and need during that transition period. Thus far, it does seem to be working okay. Another note of interest, I think, during that transition, I did talk with Cardinal representatives and CEO and staff, and made arrangements to get some Chromebooks from Cardinal donated to schools in Person County. Roxborough Community School received 80 Chromebooks. Roxborough Christian Academy received 40, and Bethel Hill Charter received 75 of those Chromebooks. So I think that was a very nice gesture on Cardinal's behalf to supplement and augment education here in the county. And so all of those have been received by those three schools and are in the process of getting those implemented into their classrooms. And the other is, and I've talked with Manager York about this, I continue to get complaints from CenturyLink for the lack of service. And I don't know what, I mean, you may comment, Manager York, about what you have done, but I don't know about the results or next steps, but I hear it all too often. And it's very coincidental. One day last week, as I drove in a certain direction, I saw, and we have two service providers in Person County, service technicians, I would say. And around the 7:30, 8 o'clock point, I saw one headed toward Yanceyville, the other toward Danville. And they're both driving out of county to service other counties. So we've got two techs that service several different counties, and it's quite a problem with just as we've gone through all the need for technology and with the need of students at home for homework or people, the growing number that work at home, and they need service, and we have to rely on those providers. So I don't know if Manager York has any comments in her report.
Sure. You ready to transition from your
Sure.
report? Okay.
Please.
Yes, Chairman and I spoke about some complaints he has received related to CenturyLink. So we reached out to them only to find out that our contact that we had previously at one of your board meetings no longer works for them. So we did not have a contact. We have now reached out to our the consultant that we're working with on the broadband update to see if he could connect us to a contact at CenturyLink that might be a little more helpful for us. And last I heard, we had not heard back. Have we?
I emailed the new contact at CenturyLink, but I have not heard back. I can try to.
Right. Right. I think we share the frustration of our residents in the customer service levels because we do not have an inside track either to getting a response back from this company. You may have also heard that there are several new funding sources becoming available to counties specifically for broadband services. So we will be presenting at your retreat some of those options, and at your next commissioners meeting, we will also have the results of the broadband update that we had commissioned, late last summer, maybe. That has taken much longer to complete than we had hoped that it would, but we will have the consultant available to hopefully come up with a game plan for how we can continue to support our residents and enhancing the broadband service for them. So stay tuned. We're working on that as well. And I just wanted to say thank you to the board for supporting some of the initiatives that you heard this morning. I think that we're making some good strides in efficiencies and effectiveness with our website update as well. So thank you for your support of those initiatives. And that's all I had this morning.
Vice Chairman Sims.
Just a couple of things. Couple of, I don't know what I consider positive things that have happened here in the last, since our last meeting, but the Pocket Park uptown, Roxborough Savings, their donation to that, to complete that project. Got to thank them for that. And I look forward to what that park's going to look like when it's completed. It certainly will be a nice place for people to go, sit down, read a book, and just enjoy our uptown atmosphere. Secondly is Palace Point had their ribbon cutting this past Friday. It's been a long time since we've had a movie theater open here in Person County. I talked with the owner. They have a lot of great plans And I'm just very excited that we now are seeing that building opening up for us in Person County. And I just look forward to this coming year, working on the board and doing great things for this county. And so I'm looking forward to that and hope everybody has a very happy new year. That's it.
Commissioner Palmer.
Yes, Commissioner Powell, I'm quite impressed. It seems to me that everybody's been working in our last 6 weeks that we've been absent. Everybody's did their homework. I'm impressed across the board. I'm delighted to get another year started. That's it.
Commissioner Gentry.
Yes, I just would like to comment on the CenturyLink. I was a former CenturyLink customer. What I have recommended in prior meetings is that there is a methodology for any citizen to go to the Federal Communications website and file an online complaint. Can IT put a link to file a complaint? If you're on our website, if you're a citizen having trouble with any service provider, CenturyLink, whoever, here's a link, file a complaint. It's one page, it's very simple. And what happens is that within 10 days, the FCC says, you've got to respond to this client. And they do. Believe it or not, they do. They may not resolve the issue, but they have to respond. They have to jump through hoops because they don't want the FCC looking at them. But if you can get 500, 1,000 citizens in Person County to do this, you might get some attention on CenturyLink. I gave up CenturyLink and I went to a satellite internet. Unfortunately, it cost me 3 times what CenturyLink does, but I work at home. I have to have internet. It works fantastic. So the options are, hopefully with more satellite technology, maybe we will get around this, because I know there are other companies that are developing satellite. We're on the list for the beta test for that. So, but I can tell you that Viasat is very good. The speed, the reliability that I have is fantastic, but it is pricey. So the other thing is that the IAIA group is going to be meeting this week to do some updates on meeting our requirements for stormwater management for Person County. So I'll have something more at the next meeting. Thanks.
Commissioner Perrier.
No report.
No report. Thank you all. Yes,
Announcement.
please.
As we
Yes.
were sitting in this meeting, I received an email from Samantha Bagby, the Executive Director at Roxbury Area Chamber of Commerce, and they have now rescheduled the Roxbury Annual Banquet schedule for this Thursday to February 3rd.
Okay, thank you. Could I back up just a moment? Commissioner Sims mentioned Palace Point, and the two of us were at that ribbon cutting, and it's fabulous news for Person County and surrounding areas. The previous owner and I had talked about that facility for several months now, going back to the first of last year, and the overwhelming favorable sale of that would be to the private entity and not some sort of county entity or something along that line. So it has absolutely gone the right way, providing entertainment and pleasure for not only Roxbury and Person County, but surrounding areas. And there are other plans in the works to do some expansion around there that was mentioned by the new owner. And so we look forward to that. So very, very good economic news for Person County. So that's all I will have. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carried. We're adjourned.